Hi, everyone. I'm Kelly O'Horo, and this is Adaptable Behavior Explained. Hello there. Thanks for tuning in to Adaptable. I'm Kelly O'Horo, your host, and today we're going to dig into one of the four attachment styles, which is avoidant attachment style. It is the third most prevalent attachment style. And if you're just tuning in, I did a full overview on attachment earlier in season one. And then I did an episode 2 weeks ago on secure attachment, last week on anxious attachment. So tune in if you want to dig in more deeply to each style, whether it's you that identifies with that attachment or someone you love. It's always helpful to understand. So I created this show so that people could better understand the behavior of others and what caused those behaviors. Because when we understand, we can be more compassionate and more kind. So this show is all about the why for behavior. So as I said, we're going to explore the attachment style that often gets really misunderstood. That's avoidant attachment. If you've ever felt uncomfortable with emotional closeness, found yourself pulling away when things get too intimate, have trouble hugging, kissing, being snuggly, and you feel more safe relying on yourself than others, then this episode is for you. So, what is avoidant attachment? Well, attachment theory helps us to understand how our early bonds shape our adult relationships, how we show up in the presence of others, whether we feel safe, we feel secure, or in this case, avoidant. Avoidant attachment is, like I said, one of the four main styles alongside those others. And avoidant attachment, it's really marked by a deep discomfort with emotional vulnerability. People with this style often grew up in environments where independence was valued over emotional expression, or where emotional needs were totally dismissed or minimized. This is where someone just doesn't have time for feelings, or they don't tolerate their own emotional experience like as a parent, and so they don't accept emotional experiences in their offspring, and they basically condition them to close them down. So people with avoidant attachment come up with beliefs about themselves like, I can't rely on others, I go it alone, people aren't my jam, needing other people makes me weak, emotions are messy. You best keep those to yourself. These beliefs show up in relationships, and they can be really challenging to manage if you're in a relationship with someone with avoidant attachment, because people with avoidant attachment will often pull away when things get too close. And so when you're maybe in conflict, they distance themselves. So it makes it harder to repair or get back in connection. They'll downplay emotional needs, avoid conflict or deep conversations or the hard conversations. And they often feel overwhelmed by others' emotional expressions. These are the people that, will say they're too much or they're too messy. So let's talk about how avoidant attachment shapes relationships. It's really not about being cold or uncaring, although it's often misperceived in that way or characterized in that way. It's about protection. So when emotional closeness feels unsafe or unfamiliar, distance becomes a coping strategy. It's how I regulate my internal world, is by disconnecting from that potential connection. And traits that you will see in someone with avoidant attachment will look like a really high value on independence and self-sufficiency or autonomy. They aren't going to lean on you, and they're not going to ask you for help. And these are the people that say, I got it. There's a lot of discomfort with emotional intimacy. They'll push away, maybe avoid eye contact, potentially difficult time expressing feelings, certainly with asking for support or help. There's oftentimes a tendency to shut down or withdraw during conflict, so they can't remain engaged to work through to the other side as easily. And they're often preferential over logic, over emotion in communication. So these are your gatekeepers, scorekeepers, fact checkers. They get really locked on to black and white thinking because the logic really weighs out for them over the emotional communication rather than what's underneath the message. They're listening for the specifics. And if you go wrong with the specifics and someone with an avoidant attachment style, well, forget it. It's really tricky to get back in because they'll get locked on. And how this shows up in relationships is someone who really engages in that push-pull cycle. The avoidantly attached person will pull away while their partner pursues the closeness, which creates a lot of tension and distress in the partner. Now, remember what I said about discomfort in others' emotions. Well, you pull away and my partner feels anxious about it, and then they become dysregulated, which pushes the person with avoidant attachment away even further. So this is a hard cycle to be in with somebody. And there's emotional suppression with somebody with emotional or with avoidant attachment where feelings are buried rather than processed. They're kind of a go along, get along. I'll deal with that later. I've got to stay focused, which leads to a lot of emotional numbness or detachment. They'll often have a dismissive reaction to something. So there's like an emotional need might be minimized or dismissed, which is kind of unintentionally hurting partners who really crave that connection or need that time and safety or connection. So there's a paradox with this one too. Avoidantly attached people often long for connection. They want it so bad, but the fear is greater that drives the behavior. And so even though they want to be in relationship and connection, they end up pushing away because of the fear overwhelming them. And so healing involves learning that closeness doesn't have to mean losing autonomy, and it doesn't have to mean it doesn't have to mean that it's automatically going to be the other shoe dropping and losing it eventually. So, how is a person parented who likely has avoidant attachment? Let's look at, again, those early years. It's all about the early childhood environment that leads to our attachment style. This is what predicates our safety and connection in relationships and sense of self in the world. So, children who develop this style often had caregivers who were emotionally distant. They might have been overly focused on achievement or uncomfortable themselves with vulnerability. And so emotional needs might have been ignored or mocked, even worse, or met with discomfort or criticism or ridicule. These are the things that says, crying's for babies or my favorite, crying's for girls, in young men, which is such a disservice to raise a boy that way. And so it's just really hard because we're all wired for the same emotions. We're not different whether we are a female, male, or identify in any other way. So common patterns that are seen in childhood would be like an emotional, unavailable caregiver. They might be physically there, but emotionally absent or potentially disconnected, not attuned, not tender and sweet. And so, I've had clients where they're like, my childhood was great and everything was good and my parents loved me. And, we went to church every Sunday and there was dinner on the table at 6. And then I asked simple questions like, how did you know you were loved? And they'd be like, well, I mean, they were there. They went to my sports. Like, but when you were hurt or upset, what did they do? Well, we didn't really do that at my house. So this is kind of an interesting thing that happens in someone who has more of an avoidant attachment style. And they might have been met with things when they were in distress, like "you're fine," or "don't be so dramatic," or "you're okay." And so this is one of the things that a child would possibly have seen if they end up with avoidant attachment. The other thing that happens is like a very high expectation for independence. So children were expected to tough it out or solve their own problems or really celebrated when they did it all by themselves. And there would be like a low tolerance for emotional expression by the caregivers as well. So vulnerability might have been seen as a weakness, which really shows up for a child in negative ways because they have to learn to suppress their emotions because they don't want to be rejected and they don't want the discomfort of that rejection. So they suppress everything that they need and feel, and they're taught to believe that those needs and feelings don't matter because they don't want to be in disconnection with their caregiver and be rejected for it. And so they end up learning, I've got to rely on myself. And they develop strategies like they go to their room all the time when they're upset and they bury their face in a pillow and they don't go lean to someone for help or love or connection when they're upset. And they often, as a result of that strategy of protection, become highly independent, but very emotionally disconnected. So these are high dealers, low feelers is what we call them. It's like they can handle and do a lot when it comes to distress, but they don't have a very good pulse on the emotional life. And so let me give you some examples of what this might look like. Let's say a child had a really hard day at school or was, bullied or something happened and comes home to cry about whatever they went through. They might be met with a parent who says things like, stop crying, you're being silly. And this child then learns that emotional expression leads to dismissal. And so then what are we doing? We're waiting for that to happen again in our adult relationships because over time we stop sharing our feelings and we build walls to protect ourselves. And that strategy done over and over and over again creates this avoidant attachment where my needs, my feelings don't matter. So really don't have them. And so we want to really look at these early messages that we were shown as children and reprocess these memories with some EMDR therapy. And this will help build new pathways for emotional safety and connection because it can change. Attachment styles aren't fixed, like I've mentioned in other episodes. So let's talk about what this looks like in adult relationships. So for me personally, because I was raised and had more of an anxious attachment, avoidant attachment triggers my stuff more than other things because I feel insecure when people are in disconnection with me. I don't do well without closure or knowing what's going on. It rattles my nervous system. So, avoidant attachment shows up in subtle but very powerful ways in adult relationships. It's like a potentially emotional distancing where there's an avoidance of deep conversations. These are people that are like working to keep it very surface. They don't want to go more deeply about their emotional experience. Maybe they change the subject quickly when emotion comes up in them or when others start showing emotion, they'll kind of switch the topic. They'll have a lot of self reliance, even to a fault, kind of refusing help or support. These are the people like, I got it, I'm good. And really, they could use a lot of support. They have a deep fear of depending on others. They'll feel trapped or smothered when someone gets too close, and they don't want to lean on others for help. And oftentimes, this is because they've been very let down in their own experience. And so they don't want that to happen again. So they really armor up and learn not to need other people. And then they'll show like a very low emotional self expression. So maybe they struggle to say, I love you, or express vulnerability. Or these are those people that hug, like they don't hug warm. They don't hug like with an embrace. They hug like like it was a robot. And so this is a more avoidant attachment strategy. They oftentimes have pretty severe conflict avoidance, and they'll shut down or walk away during a disagreement. These are the people that will say, like, I'm not dealing with this, or I'm not having this conversation right now. And they just straight avoid it. So, what might this look like in an adult situation? So, let's imagine someone with a partner who's expressing their feelings of hurt or dissatisfaction or betrayal. Avoidant attached person may feel overwhelmed by that and they might shut down, or they might just respond with logic or a solution instead of empathy. Maybe they even say something like, you're overreacting, or can't we just move on? Or are we going to do this all day? So it's very dismissive of someone's emotional experience. And that can be really painful for securely attached or anxiously attached people, because really we're all hardwired to want to be in connection, especially with those that we love. So let me give you another example. This might be someone where during a moment of connection or closeness, like cuddling or sharing emotions, the avoidantly attached person might suddenly feel uncomfortable and like pull away. And maybe they like quickly pull up a distraction, like showing you something on their phone or changing the subject really quickly. And it can feel to someone who is trying to be connected and close, like kind of awkward, but they're just really deeply uncomfortable with physical or emotional connection. And so if you recognize these patterns, know that those aren't personal. They're not trying to be hurtful. They're protective strategies. They're not flaws. And they can be softened with awareness and with support and with some time. And so don't lose hope. If this is an attachment strategy that you identify with, recognize that you're watching this show, you're learning about it, and the first step in learning and changing something is really just awareness that it's even a character, or not a character trait, but a trait that you can identify with. So how do we heal? How do we move towards secure attachment? Because avoidant attachment really can shift, and it, just like I said, it begins with understanding that vulnerability isn't a weakness; it's connection, and it takes a lot more bravery and strength to be in vulnerability than it takes to be in disconnection. And we got to start by naming stuff, name to tame. So we want to name the discomfort. We want to notice when closeness feels overwhelming and really slow down and explore why. What is coming up in me? Closeness is really making me internally dysregulated. And then we want to practice emotional expression, starting small, like share a feeling or ask for a little bit of support. And then, express some appreciation when you get it. Ultimately, we have to challenge old beliefs. I don't need anyone can become, it's okay to lean on others. It's okay to learn to trust. It's okay to try this on, because building trust takes time. We want to let safe relationships show you that emotional intimacy can be safe if you work toward it. And I always say, getting some therapy and deep reflection is going to be the fastest way toward a shift in your attachment style. Working with a therapist helps you unpack the early messages and build new relational skills and new neural pathways within the therapeutic relationship itself. And as you're doing some of this exploration, you want to ask yourself, what relationships do feel safe? What people have earned some trust for me to practice this with? What can connection look like? Do you know anyone who models that? And can you watch them and kind of see, can I practice that until it feels authentic for me? Because building emotional fluency is part of that reclaiming of your adaptability and earning your way toward secure attachment, which really is the goal to healthy, safe relationships is developing a secure attachment style. So if you have an avoidant attachment style, you can learn. It can make you feel like your emotions are dangerous, but they're just signals. And we just want to get curious and lean in. Celebrate those emotional wins every time you share a feeling or stay present during a feeling or stay present during a conflict. That's a sign of growth. And in order to reconnect with joy, you want to find moments of connection that do feel safe and do feel meaningful and take some time to celebrate those. It's important to unshame yourself, though. I want you to be thinking, I'm not too distant. I'm protecting something tender. It means learning to stay present with that discomfort and learning to trust that connection doesn't have to cost your independence. It doesn't have to be painful. Now, when we're in loving relationships, we will have pain. There's no way around that. However, those reparative moments are the most beautiful opportunity to say, hey, it doesn't have to be the same as it was in my childhood. I can learn something different because avoidant attachment is rooted in emotional distancing. And you had to learn it if this is how you identify or you love someone that does this also. And it shows up as discomfort with the closeness and emotional suppression and oftentimes that hyper independence that I discussed. And remember, it's not too late. It's never too late to learn how to heal through vulnerability and trust and really intentional connection. You're not broken if this is something that you deal with. You're protecting that something important, and you can always learn new ways to connect. So, what does emotional safety look like for you? What small steps can you take toward connection just today? Think about that. Drop something in the comments if this resonated. And please subscribe and leave a review and let someone you know who might be struggling with this hear this, share it with them. The first step in healing is really understanding something. And so this is a gift to somebody if they need to hear this so they can better understand themselves. So thanks for tuning in. I appreciate your time. Hopefully this was helpful for you. And until we meet again, don't forget to lead with love. It'll never steer you wrong.